I honestly had very controversial feelings watching this animation. Let's talk a little about that. So guys, how are you? I hope you are well. I am the Monio, the interdimensional demon who talks the most about Scott Pilgrim on YouTube, and you are on my channel. So, let's get straight to the point. Is this animation cool? Well, at first I didn't like it, but then it got good. But the Monio, what do you mean by that? You can explain better? Well, let's put it into context then. I'm a big fan of Scott Pilgrim's live-action film. It's one of my favorite films, but I've never read the comics, and I've never played the game. When I heard that Netflix announced an animation, with the same voice cast as the 2010 film, I was excited, as it would have the visual style of the comics, and the great interpretation of the characters with the film's actors. So technically the animation would be incredible, as it would have the best of two worlds, and would please all fans. The plot of Scott Pilgrim is very simple. Scott falls in love with a girl called Ramona Flowers, and she also falls in love with him. But for them to be able to stay together, Scott will have to face the League of Evil Exes, which is an association formed by 7 of Ramona's evil ex-boyfriends, and he will have to defeat each of the ex-boyfriends, in very fun battles, in a video game style, to be able to date Ramona. Ramona is the mysterious girl with colorful hair, who in the film is played by actress Mary Elizabeth Winstead, also known as the most beautiful woman alive. When I started watching the first episode, I didn't like what I saw. The visual style caused me some strangeness. The animation didn't manage to make me like it right away, and in my opinion, they didn't even manage to reproduce the comic side well of the film, with all that humor based on the physicality of the live action. And I believe that a lot of this strangeness, and my not having enjoyed the beginning so much, is due to my experience being limited to the film, my never having had contact with the comic, or perhaps a very strong attachment to the actors, or perhaps out of nostalgia, since the film is already relatively old. The first episode starts exactly like the film, with Scott being introduced, along with his friend Wallace, and showing how he met Ramona Flowers for the first time, until the part where Scott asks Ramona to go to his band's concert, and that's where he faces the first of 7 evil exes. The problem is that all of this was being shown in a much more summarized way than in the film, with a lot of cool details that are in the film, and that don't exist in the animation, even some things that deepen Scott's development as a character. So at a certain point in the first episode, I was thinking, is this what this animation is going to be about? Will it be a worse version of what was already done in the film? And that's when this Netflix animation surprises you, since at the end of the first episode, when Scott goes to face Ramona's first ex-boyfriend, Scott not only loses the fight, but he dies. But the Monio, how does the protagonist die in the first episode? What is shown in the other episodes? Well, you'll have to find out about that by watching, but the plot obviously takes completely different directions from the film, and I would say even better, since most of the characters in the film, especially Ramona's ex-boyfriends, have little or no development. They basically boil down to obstacles, or if you prefer to use the video game analogy, they are just the bosses of each stage, which need to be defeated to advance in the game. And here, each of the characters actually becomes a real character, with minimal development, and with a character arc, something we didn't have in the 2010 film. I honestly don't know if this Netflix series is faithfully adapting the comics or if it is making an original story. If you who are watching this video have read the comics, I ask you to please comment. I believe that the script for the series is original, as the 2010 film is considered within this story, in a metalinguistic way. But the Monio, can you explain it better? Within the plot of the series, Scott's friend decides to make a film, and this film will tell the story of what would have happened if instead of dying, Scott Pilgrim defeated Ramona's ex-boyfriends. So this 2010 film, with actors playing the characters, it's actually this film, in which Scott's friend is the director, and which tells an alternative story to what really happened in the plot, and I thought that was simply brilliant. At the time the movie was made, the comic was still being released, so I figured that if the Netflix series is an adaptation of the comic or is at least more faithful to the comic than the movie, I knew that at some point that the story would be different, but I didn't imagine it would be like this, with such an intelligent and unusual solution to unite the two versions. But demonio, how does this new plot of the series work without Scott? Will he come back somehow? Well, you'll need to find out about this. I really don't want to give too many spoilers, especially if you've only watched the film. Like me, if that's your case, you'll have a great experience, since the plot is full of mysteries, and the revelations come little by little. At that point, the series had already won me over, mainly because I discovered that many characters who were one-dimensional in the film here turn out to be really cool, and you start to like them. But the character that improved the most for me compared to the film was Ramona, since in the film she kind of doesn't have a character arc. She ends the film the same way she started it, and in the series you understand the process through which Ramona went through, and this process has a conclusion, making the character change in the end. And a very interesting detail is that even the fact that Ramona frequently changes her hair color has a reason within the narrative, whereas in the film, it was just a detail. The art direction of the series is very beautiful, with a drawing style that emulates the comic very well, with very cool animated scenes, with vivid colors and pixelated effects that make reference to video games from the 16-bit era. If you've read the comic or played the game, I believe the style will please you a lot. One cool thing is that despite having cartoon art with simple drawings, the characters are very expressive and manage to convey emotion in more dramatic scenes. But I think the highest point of the series is the ending, which is a huge break in expectations, extremely creative and unusual, with a solid message consistent with everything the series wanted to say, and despite being surrounded by crazy concepts, it's a message you can easily relate to. This ending not only ends the story as a whole, but it made me like the Scott Pilgrim franchise even more, to the point that I'm even considering buying the game. I still love the 2010 film. I think it's incredible. But one thing I needed to understand is that, although the series has the same voices as the original actors, it is something completely separate from the film. So if you watch the film like me, and go watch the Netflix series, my tip is, don't create nostalgic expectations, because nostalgia is something you won't get here, so you can have fun. See the series as something else, which coexists alongside the film, and which is completely different, but no less fun. Now if you only read the comics, I believe you will have a much closer experience to what you read, perhaps even being able to understand some references that I wasn't able to understand. But what about you? Have you watched the Scott Pilgrim series? Have you also watched the film or read the comic? Leave it in the comments, and if you like the video, subscribe to see the next ones. Until next time my people, demonic hugs.